So guys, what is a component? A component is in React is the building blocks of React. As we can see here, this is our nav bar, this is a sidebar, an item detail component. So we see that components are just single sections of our application. Depending on your application, you can carve out the way different components are going to be rendered on your UI. It's basically a JavaScript class or function which optionally accept inputs or props. Remember, I said optionally. So it's basically a JavaScript function that optionally accept inputs, or we call it props. And it returns a React element that describes how the UI is going to look like. It must have a return value. Take, for example, this is a component, a JavaScript function with a return value. Right, there are two kinds of components. We have a stateless component and a stateful component. A stateless component is a component that does not have any state in it, while a stateful component is one that has state. Some people call it containers. So they create two folders. They call one components and they call others containers. So containers are referred to as the stateful components. So these are components that make use of states, while the components are the stateless component. So we are going to look at that and you will see. Remember, I said a component always return a JSX. This is the JSX. So what is JSX? JSX is a JavaScript extension that allows us to describe React object tree using a syntax that resembles that of HTML. So you are very familiar with HTML. So we try to depict that same kind of thing. That is why we have JSX. So under here, when we have our return, it is our JSX. Now this JSX is taking just a single element and it wraps every other thing or component inside it. So when we try to create two elements here, we are going to get an error. Immediately React shows you an error. We cannot have two elements in our JSX. We must have just one, and then in the one we can put as many as we want inside. Okay? Yeah. Also note that in a component, when we are making our component, we must start it with a capital letter. We name our component like this with a capital letter. And then don't forget, after your return value with your JSX inside, you must export the component. When you export the component, wheresoever you want to use it, let's take, for example, we want to use our component inside here. We start by importing it before we make use of it. So in our next video, we are going to talk more about JSX.